Hello, friends. I hope you are well. I am doing very well. So I'm gonna do some readings here, some poetry. I wanted to share, and some AI art that I've done, um, and some music. I want to play a song. It's the one of the oldest songs that we have, the Epic of Gilgamesh in Sumerian. I'll put a link to it in the description.
Eşkalam karinda şu aba şurin nakamakka niçta Ankita bara bara ki anta bara suraba non lupa
Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven by W.B. Yeats. Had I the heavens as embroidered cloths, inwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. This is from the Greek Mythology Worldwide site.com. The Minotaur and the Labyrinth, a psychological perspective. Introduction 1. The myth of the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, has captivated imaginations for centuries. It is a tale that intertwines themes of power, fear, and the struggle against the unknown. The Labyrinth, a complex maze crafted to contain the beast, serves as a powerful symbol in this narrative. This article aims to explore the Minotaur myth through a psychological lens, shedding light on its deep-seated meanings and implications for understanding human nature. Psychological analysis provides a unique framework for interpreting myths, revealing how these ancient stories reflect universal human experiences. By examining the Minotaur and the Labyrinth, we can gain insights into the darker aspects of our psyche and the journey towards self-awareness. This article will delve into the historical context, the psychological symbolism, and the implications for modern human behavior. 2. Historical context of the Minotaur myth. The origins of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth can be traced back to ancient Greek mythology, specifically associated with the island of Crete. The story begins with King Minos, who, seeking to demonstrate his divine right to rule, prayed to Poseidon for a magnificent bull. When Minos failed to sacrifice the bull, Poseidon cursed him, causing his wife to fall in love with the creature. The result of this union was the Minotaur, a monstrous being that embodied the chaos of human desire and fear. The cultural significance of the Minotaur myth in ancient Greece was profound. It served as a cautionary tale about hubris and the consequences of straying from divine will. The labyrinth, designed by Daedalus to contain the Minotaur, symbolizes the intricate challenges of life and the complexity of human emotions. Symbolism associated with the Minotaur and the Labyrinth extends beyond their narrative roles. The Minotaur represents the prime instincts and the darker sides of human nature, while the Labyrinth embodies the struggles of navigating one's inner world. 3. The Minotaur as a representation of the unconscious. Carl Jung, a prominent figure in psychology, introduced the concept of collective unconscious, which encompasses shared memories and archetypes that shape human experience. The Minotaur can be seen as a manifestation of these archetypes, representing repressed fears and desires that lie beneath the surface of consciousness. In this context, the Minotaur symbolizes the shadow self, the part of the psyche that contains the traits and impulses we prefer to ignore. Confronting the Minotaur can be seen as an allegory for facing our inner conflicts and acknowledging the aspects of ourselves that we find uncomfortable or shameful. 4. The Labyrinth as a metaphor for psychological struggle. The labyrinth serves as a powerful metaphor for the complexities of the human mind. Just as Theseus navigates the twists and turns of the maze, individuals must navigate their own psychological landscapes filled with confusion and uncertainty. Key points about the labyrinth as a metaphor include: the labyrinth represents the intricate pathways of thoughts and emotion. Each turn in the labyrinth symbolizes a different challenge of fear to confront. The journey through the labyrinth signifies personal growth and self-discovery. Ultimately, the process of navigating the labyrinth leads to a deeper understanding of oneself as individuals confront their fears and emerge transformed. 5. The hero's journey, Theseus and the confrontation with the Minotaur. Theseus, the hero of the myth, embodies the archetypal journey of confronting one's fears. His quest to defeat the Minotaur is not merely a physical battle, but a psychological confrontation with the unknown aspects of himself. Significant elements of Theseus's journey include his bravery in facing the Minotaur symbolizes the importance of confronting one's fears. The role of Ariadne, who provides Theseus with a thread to navigate the labyrinth, underscores the significance of guidance and support in the journey of self-discovery. My wife just gave me a sticker, a Minotaur sticker. She's sweet. Theseus's victory over the Minotaur represents the triumph of reason and courage over primal instincts. 6. Modern psychological interpretations of the myth. The Minotaur and the Labyrinth continue to resonate in contemporary psychology. These symbols serve as tools for therapists and individuals alike, aiding in the exploration of personal struggles and inner conflicts. Case studies illustrate how clients relate to the Minotaur as a representation of their own fears and challenges. The labyrinth becomes a metaphor for the therapeutic journey, highlighting the process of navigating complex emotions and experiences. Examples include individuals confronting addiction as a form of battling their own personal minotaur, exploring childhood trauma as a journey through the labyrinth of the psyche, utilizing the myth in workshops focused on personal growth and empowerment. 7. Implications for understanding human behavior. The minotaur serves as a powerful symbol of inner conflict, illustrating the duality of human nature. It reminds us of the importance of confronting the monster within, as ignoring or repressing these aspects can lead to destructive behaviors. Insights gained from the myth include understanding that inner conflicts are a universal experience, recognizing the necessity of facing fears to achieve personal growth, gaining awareness of the motivations driving our behaviors, both conscious and unconscious. 8. Conclusion. This exploration of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth through a psychological lens reveals the enduring power of myth in understanding the human psyche. By examining the themes of the unconscious, psychological struggle, and the hero's journey, we gain valuable insights into our own experiences. The legacy of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth reminds us that confronting our fears and navigating the complexities of our minds is a vital part of the human experience. As we continue to engage with these ancient stories, we uncover the timeless truths they hold about our nature, our struggles, and our paths to self-discovery. And I'd add, self-knowing. This is a great, I think, myth to focus on, related to the work of knowing thyself and self-awareness, gaining self-awareness. I spent a long time really focusing on this myth and found my own struggles with the beast paralleled the myth quite a bit. And that really showed me, there's really common experience in between humans, ancient and modern humans. But, there's some theories. You have the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. That's a book by Julian Jaynes. And some really interesting theories analyzing our literature from the ancient past. He traced changes in the way that human consciousness expressed itself. Let me read a quick blurb from the julianjaynes.org site. It's an article titled "Neuroscience Confirms Julian Jaynes' Neurological Model." I'll post references in the description to the poems, music, and anything I refer to here. The article says, beginning in 1999, research began to emerge confirming Julian Jaynes' neurological model for the bicameral mind via MRI studies showing a right-left temporal lobe interaction during auditory verbal hallucinations. Yet more than 20 years later, there remains ongoing confusion on the subject. For example, a recent post on Scott Alexander's Star Slate Codex blog was completely wrong on this issue. He's a famous blogger who's now moved to Substack. Really great writing, very interesting guy. I believe he's a psychiatrist, if I'm not mistaken. To help clear, back to the article, to help clear up this lingering confusion, I revisit this topic with an excerpt from one of my related newsletter articles, followed by quotes from related research, related video, further reading, and additional resources. So, over 3 decades ago, Julian Jaynes introduced his theory of the origin of consciousness in a historically older mentality called the bicameral mind. While the technology was not then available to test his ideas, Jaynes suggested a possible neurological model for the bicameral mind. Briefly stated, he reasoned that auditory hallucinations emanate from the areas of the right temporal lobe corresponding to the language areas and the left temporal lobe, and are subsequently processed or heard in the left temporal lobe language areas. Because of their external quality, the bicameral person experiencing auditory hallucinations interpreted them as the externally generated commands of a dead ancestor, chief, king, or god. To this day, those who experience auditory hallucinations often hear behavioral commands and experience them as being externally generated. It's fascinating. Owen Barfield was one of the Inklings, which was a literary club with members including C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings series, and Owen Barfield and another gentleman that I can't recall off the top of my head. What's very interesting about Owen Barfield, he has a theory or theories related to diction and poetry and also human consciousness. And some of his ideas, I think, align a little bit with Julian James's ideas. His concept is related to something called original participation of human beings with consciousness. And then we have final participation. So at one time, they theorize, some folks theorize anyway, that, and by the way, Owen Barfield is a lot more significant than he's given credit for normally, and across academia. He's a great thinker and actually did some really valuable work. Again, I'll post a link to his site. But Owen, basically what these guys are saying is that human beings used to have less self-consciousness, and they were directed more by these auditory prompts and even possibly visions, and a kind of we would call kind of hallucination today. And that's maybe been more internalized in modern humans, but it sounded like they potentially they were hearing these things and being directed to do certain things. That's very interesting. Related to the work, we're trying to delve into the unconscious and bring it to the surface and harmonize that with our minds and our body, so that we're operating basically as self-awarely as we can. Original participation is when humans still lived in an enchanted universe. They perceived differently. They didn't have, perhaps they didn't have an inner dialogue like we have. And Owen's theory is that after the Enlightenment, 1100 to about 1500, as philosophy arose and formed, that we became more rational, and we went from irrational to rational, and that was a period of non-participation with human consciousness. So we were kind of estranged, and we live in that time now. We're estranged from our unconscious, where we were very intimately connected to it before. Neuroscience, and this is proven and accepted, that you don't actually make choices. Your body or some processes in you make decisions underneath your consciousness or not, without your conscious awareness, and then you act them out. You do. So there's a big debate right now about whether we have free will or not, and biologically they do not think we have free will. That's an interesting rabbit hole to explore, but that's Robert Sapolsky, I believe, is really out there pushing that right now. He's a professor at Stanford in neuroscience. He's a genius. I mean, the guy's brilliant. Spent his career studying primates, and he's a fascinating guy. I don't agree with a lot of his ideas, but but from a scientific perspective, I think a lot of what he makes a strong case. All right, back to Owen Barfield. So we've gone through this period of non-participation where we've developed self-awareness. I think you could even tie this into Nietzsche's idea that the Enlightenment has killed God within our culture, or at least attempted to, or given, that's the birth of secular humanism. And, the religious folks are, they have a certain perspective on this. They see that as, as totally wrong. I think the ecstatic religious folks are tapping into not the intellectual, folks, but the ecstatic, emotional feelers in these religions, the ones that really channel some deep energy. I think they're tapping into some deep unconscious energy, and the religious rituals connect somebody without them even being aware of it, connects them deeper with themselves. They're giving it a name. This is my theory. They're giving it a name, God, and they're externalizing it. I say, and I was a Christian for many years, 20 decades, God is not out there. And whatever God is, we certainly don't know what it is, or if there is such a thing. But our conception of it is so anthropomorphized externally that they've built a whole set of fairy tales around. But in a way, are they fairy tales? They are. I think they're psychological tools that they have. Some know that they're not real, that they've been made up or changed and altered many, many times and revised. But most don't. They keep most of the scholars of religions typically do not share their ideas and the really difficult ideas with the layman. And this is definitely true in the Catholic Church and other churches, the Orthodox Church. And this is my experience anyway. We've been lied to. I think at the end of the day, after my 3 years of, what I think is going on here is that, when you ignore the unconscious, when it's trying to tell you something, it will turn the heat up on your mind like you just wouldn't believe, right? I mean, and we have different names for some of these experiences. They're externalized, and we have a dualistic mind, right? So we tend to think dualistically about these things. But this is where the work really is. I'm not going to say going all the way into non-duality per se is the way to go, because I think there's a lot of problems with non-duality as well. But it's an interesting approach to human consciousness and thinking about it. But the work I think is really about diving into that unconscious. That's where you really suffer and struggle. Because that's exactly, I mean, we're talking dream work. We're talking, memory work. We're talking, because we're trying to remember ourselves, and remembering ourselves connects us to something so much deeper. Then you get into the territory of Carl Jung, right? Where he felt there was a shared unconscious between all of humanity and even maybe the planet. And we're just one kind of, branch of that consciousness, and the human branch of that consciousness. This is a lot of speculation, right? So, but Carl Jung, mapped his psyche in a scientific way, using the scientific method. Others took a more direct approach, and they weren't so scientific about it. They were very intuitive about it. So there's this tug of war between intuition and the scientific process. Now, I personally think you should try to apply the scientific process and be skeptical of yourself and your own ideas and others, and you must deny all claims. In my view, the starting point is to deny all claims. You can take no one's word for anything. You don't know if everyone around you is just a demon trying to trick you. As a famous philosopher theorized, I'm not going to give his name. You look it up. But how do you know you're not being totally fooled? And because of the way our senses work, we certainly could be. Because the mind does not experience reality, does not show you reality. The mind creates its own evolved image that evolved to give you the best chance to survive in this environment. What is it? We think we know everything. We think we know. We can't even trust our senses, is what I'm trying to say. And there's so many ways to fool the human being. It's unbelievable. They're so easy to hypnotize. The average human is very easy to hypnotize. What do you think, You have Edward Bernays in the 20th century. He was related to Sigmund Freud. He worked behind the scenes for many decades, fooling America and selling ideas when they needed to be sold, and PR. You know, he was the progenitor, or at least a big figure in public relations, which is basically learning how to manipulate human psyche, the human psyche. So they know a lot more about humans in that, you know, down that stream than the average human certainly does about themselves. Does this sound fair to you? Does this sound the way that we should be raising our children, to be so unaware? It's like the physicists and quantum physicists being told, hey, forget all the spooky stuff, just calculate. You know, that's a common story, you know, common thing that physicists will say. And not every physicist takes that advice or follows that standard. But anyway, there's once you've kind of taken a really broad view or broad survey across all these, you know, psychology and science, and, you know, and you can start to piece together, you start to get an impression of things. It changes over time, the more information you get. Anyway, let me get back to Barfield. So Barfield had original participation, where we were intimately connected with nature, and we were basically kind of not self-directed or directed. We were simply kind of, doing things, and people marveled. There's some examples in the ancient record of kings. I forget the exact name off the top of my head right now, who had the ability to have an inner dialogue. And that was the beginning of it, you know, back in the ancient Greek times. That's when philosophy and a lot of the thinking that went on started to help to develop in the Western mind this duality. This I'd say it really went into hyperdrive after Descartes. I think, therefore I am. But that's not an accurate translation either. So anyway, we go from then non-participation, and then we go into something called final participation. And final participation is when all of the parts of us are knit together again and operating together, you know, in an aware way. You are aware of their operation, mind, body, heart, all operating together. And that really correlates a lot with Gurdjieff as well. And I've just briefly mentioned him several times. But he was a real scientist of the soul, in my opinion. Not a scientist scholastically, but a very intuitive, a great intuitive master. A great master, really. I mean, I've learned enough of him, and I'm just taking people, you know, I'm reading books, right? So what do I know? I don't know Gurdjieff, but you do get a picture from the things that have been written about him. But with Gurdjieff and Owen Barfield, there are some interesting correlations. Gurdjieff emphasized that human consciousness is not fully developed and requires intentional effort and work to awaken. He described humanity as largely asleep, and he posited that conscious evolution is a central task for those who seek higher understanding. Conscious evolution. They both felt like consciousness evolves. Barfield explored the evolution of human consciousness through language and literature. He argued that humanity's collective consciousness has evolved over time from original participation, an intuitive state, to the modern consciousness, a more individuated and abstract state, and not directly interacting consciously with the subconscious, but more driven by it. Unconscious, the unconscious. So we're actually more robotic today. Man, that ties right back into Gurdjieff, saying, in his view, people are basically machines. People aren't going to like that, to hear that. That's why it's hard work. Because to start the work, you have to admit you are asleep. And you can only admit that when you've entered into a lucid state. His work and my work, when I say that my work is not necessarily Gurdjieff's work, it's my work I've done to date. And it correlates a lot with Gurdjieff. And why did that happen? Why is that? How could that be true? Because human consciousness is, we have a similar human consciousness, maybe even sharing the same consciousness on a certain level. but there's common experience, between human beings in different times. It's fascinating. If you have an open mind and you really dig into this, and you have to use your own experience as your guide, you have to test everything through your own experience. It's fascinating. Anyway, it's an amazing journey, I think. But okay, so Barfield had original participation, then modern consciousness, and then final participation. So the next stage involves a synthesis of all three these states: original, modern, and now a future. And I think final participation is happening started in the 20th century and maybe earlier. But final participation is the synthesis of all these things. That's exactly what Gurdjieff's work is about. Exactly. And when you bring these three together, you make a lens that can see in a different way. And maybe we're seeing more reality when those are all aligned. So both of them are, see human consciousness as a dynamic, evolving process, rather than just be fixed. Why wouldn't our consciousness also evolve with our body? Now, a lot of scientists think that, consciousness is emergent from the wetware, from the biology. But there's a lot of evidence that just can't be true. But again, hotly debated. Don't take my word for anything. Do your own. Dig into it yourself. So, but they both share also the belief that humanity is in a transitional point in its development. We could blow the whole thing up at any time. Look at what is going on in the world today. I'm telling you right now, the world today is illustrating the unconscious, fighting to make people aware of what's happening underneath. It's trying to connect us back, draw us back in. And there have been horrible shocks to bring us about, to make some course corrections. And there'll be more, much more powerful. I think there'll be eruptions of the unconscious, and they will look monstrous in the world. That's what happens when you ignore these forces that are primal in us, in our psyche. That's the other thing with Gurdjieff's work that I really appreciate. He has, in my opinion, better than any scientist. I've said this. I think he is a better model for the human psyche than anybody else, even Carl Jung, because it is really connected, I think, to the esoteric and mystical side of what we're talking about. That's where Barfield's, really thinks that you really aren't speaking or communicating correctly unless you're writing poetry. It would be more in line with consciousness if we were talking poetically all the time. And I have to say, as I've gone through my own work, poetry has exploded out of me. I've been very creative. The creative aspects of my life have they just went up 1,000%. And I think this is dangerous work. You could lose your mind, and many have. So, I was fortunate to be able to look at it objectively and not take it, so to the point. Now, I think this is what happens with religion too. People cannot think clearly. They do not stand up. They do not keep a proper distance, and they go all in, all in. And then you can't talk to them. You can't reach them. You can't relate to them. They're living in a different world, and they coalesce and gather with other folks. Now, the belief of some religions that they have to enforce that view and their experience on others, I tell you, there is no greater crime in humanity, in my opinion, than one person forcing another person to act and do what they are doing. We need to be able to communicate openly. This is a unique time in, I think, our history, because it's given us a chance to contemplate without being burned at the stake. Because what I'm saying, a few hundred years ago, I would be killed. I mean, look at the fight that Martin Luther had just within his own religion. Imagine, what the atheists thought back then, or the ones that were giving themselves to this deep intuitive, way as well. I mean, there was no way to talk about it. And the world was very different. That's something beautiful, I think, about the modern world, that we have the ability to do this. So we live in a unique time, I think, but in a really good time of conflict, but still a good time. So, both Gurdjieff and Barfield, Gurdjieff had his system called the Fourth Way, which is You can look that up. I won't explain it right now. But it emphasized the necessity of conscious effort, discipline, collaboration with others to transform your inner state. And he called his system the work. So I've stolen that and kind of co-opted that. So Barfield, while Barfield didn't advocate a formal system, and this is where I think people really, they intellectualize these things, but they don't. And that's what Barfield did, I believe. But through his writing and poetry, he also intuitively and deeply, I think, unconsciously experienced these things. Because he was so creative. But a lot of folks that intellectualize this, they're not doing the work. They're still very far away, and they're in their minds. They are definitely firmly grounded in their minds. But this work takes you into the unconscious, into the mystical, areas of the human psyche. If you're doing it, I think, right, the best way you can do it. So now I think these experiences, intuitive, unconscious experience, I think they are what gave birth to religions, and what the religions called God are actually aspects of our own psyche. But then again, the concept is in some circles, in the religious circles, that we are all gods. We are God here. See David Bentley Hart on that one. Love that guy, David Bentley Hart. What a brilliant guy. Very interesting. And he's cantankerous as hell, which I like as well. I like cantankerous mystics who will tell you to just, to get out of it, get out of here, kid. Leave me alone. Anyway, so Barfield didn't have his own a system. He wrote. I think that is a form of a system, and he wrote poetry. But his philosophy suggests that a deep engagement with language, art, and imagination is necessary for advancing consciousness. Everything that Trump wants to destroy and lock down, and that the right wants to lock down, they want to lock down the mind that exploded out of the 60s, that was fueled by language and art and imagination, the beat poets, and then the hippies. And then I've gone deep into those, down those holes. And, it's obvious that our society is still reacting to the eruption of consciousness that occurred, in the 50s and the 60s in response to World War II. It was nihilism. It was existentialism on the rise. I mean, people were struggling, and it triggered I think it broke down the barrier that the rational mind had erected over a thousand years, since Aristotle. And I'm sure, and earlier. I mean, there's no clear lines here. Consciousness works in surges. It's like a big amorphous. I see it as a big amorphous blob, and it's just it's pushing out tentacle parts of itself and pulling them back. It's interesting. Okay. So, but they both stress transformation of consciousness requires intentional, sustained effort, whether through spiritual practice or intellectual or imaginative engagement. This is where romanticism is a big key factor. So there's a plot here. There's a thing. There's something you can trace something through these. The pinball is hitting all sorts of things as you trace the history of human consciousness, which is our story of awakening. I think our history is our story of evolution and awakening to what we really are and what we're capable of. I'm in awe and in wonder. Rumi, let me read the poem. Trade your cleverness for wonder. Trade your cleverness for wonder. Definitely one of my mantras. Trade your cleverness for wonder and awe. Okay. All right. The other correlation between Gurdjieff and Barfield, there's an interconnectedness of inner and outer worlds. Gurdjieff taught that the microcosm of the individual reflects the macrocosm of the universe. That's in a lot of esoteric thought. As above, so below. Awakening involves aligning these inner and outer dimensions through self-knowledge and effort. Barfield's concept of participation highlights the interconnectedness of human thought and the external world. He believed that the way we perceive and articulate reality shapes reality itself. So they both emphasize a deep interrelationship between the inner and the outer world, suggesting that personal transformation impacts the broader reality. Finally, they are similar in transcending materialism. Yep, there's the big jump. That's the one that'll stop you. That'll stop a lot of modern day folks. Even, most religions are materialistic. They're living for an afterlife and they're going to get rewarded in heaven. It's just an extension of the materialism that they live in on earth. But it can be, you can transcend. I mean, this is where, Emerson and Walt Whitman and a lot of folks from America. I think this is one of our unique contributions to the world, what we did in the 19th century and the thinking we did in the 19th century to kind of pave the way for the 60s in a way. All right. So Gurdjieff criticized modernity for its mechanical, materialistic approach to life, which he believed kept people in a state of sleep. He advocated awakening to higher spiritual realities. And he picked across every system. He went through some very deep esoteric traditions and kind of created a new, synthesized a new way, or kind of a way that he found across all those ways. Not just commonalities. He did some unique stuff too. But that's what gives him such power and reality. The ones that are the myth makers, the ones that can create reality and create new realities that help others to live in a framework that helps them to live well or live better. These are the real geniuses. I mean, I think that's what Jesus did, and Buddha and Confucius. I think there's been a lot of individuals that have risen at key times, even Einstein. And many scientists, but they've helped to, I think, open us up, all together. It takes a little help from your friends. Anyway, so Gurdjieff criticized modernity. Barfield critiqued the materialistic worldview of the modern age, arguing that it impoverishes our understanding of consciousness and reality. He called for a return to a more participatory, imaginative engagement with the world. And hey, there's our tie into physics. This is a participatory universe. You got to participate, and your participation changes things, and you are changed by, others participating. So both rejected materialism, and they sought to re-enchant the human experience, aiming at a holistic, unified understanding of existence. Look, an artist and a poet is a lot closer to this than anybody who isn't. So art was a huge aspect of I'll just say it, my awakening. Okay, whatever. It was key. And I'm talking about, we got to get people doing some finger painting. Like, I started doing finger painting first, and then I started working with clay, and then I started writing, and then I started speaking, and then I mean, it was just across the board in every way. And ideas, projects, and I could spend the rest of my life just pursuing art, artistic projects. So while Gurdjieff's system is more practical and mystical, Barfield's work is more intellectual and literary. Somewhere in the middle is a sweet spot, by the way, I think. They share a vision of consciousness as an evolving dynamic process requiring active engagement. Both challenge the modern tendency toward passivity and materialism, advocating instead for an intentional, participatory, transformative approach to life and awareness. Their shared focus on participation, effort, and interconnectedness underscores a profound synergy in their respective explorations of consciousness. These were explorers, and there's been many who have gone and brought back tales. All of our stories, those are imaginative efforts. The imagination, this is where I spent a long time studying this Henry Corbin, who was an Islamic studies scholar. And he found a synchronicity and correlations between the Western canon of stories and fairy tales and the Eastern. interestingly. And there was a lot of commonalities. He worked with Carl Jung very closely. They both kind of shared notes, and there was, Corban's idea is that he came up with the concept, or at least spoke of the concept of the mundus imaginalis, that the imaginal world is the real world, and that the unconscious is really our bridge into the imaginal world. Many modern artists will say and have written about that the imagination is really religious folks, for sure. They're in the imaginal space. They are definitely, but they're not doing it with awareness. They're taking it literally when it's figurative, where it's imaginal. And this is one of the, I think, conflicts of our time. And these are not things we can argue about or convince each other of. That's just not possible. So one has to, they're like airlocks. You have to get from one airlock to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's why it's a process and a progression, because you could shatter your psyche or your soul or your inner life. You could shatter it and lose all grasp of it. And plenty of people have gone mad. I think what drives people mad is being disconnected and not unified, being separate bodies and within themselves and not being unified. It's a struggle. The conditioning of society drives them crazy. So I think this is also some correlation or some tie-ins to attention deficit, autism, that in a way there's been maybe some physical changes that allow people to more easy or in an easier way access the imaginal realm and which is the unconscious, world, where there's a lot of things that a lot of our myths and monsters come from that place, dreams and ideas from that place, I think. So anyway, Cabin in the Woods is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, illustrates what I'm saying very clearly. Those monsters in Cabin in the Woods represent our unconscious. Those gods at the base of, those gods, this is my own idea, but those gods that are in the movie, they have to go through rituals to prevent the gods from coming up to the surface and destroying everything. So, in a real way, the gods are within us. They never left. They're here as our emotions. Maybe they're in our psyche. We've internalized them. The gods were always internal to us. We just gave them expression through myth and through verbal myth and writing. It was when we started writing, and this is this is something in a book I'm going to talk about on this topic. When we started writing, we changed our consciousness. That's really where the non-participatory kind of and the rational mind started to kind of take over. And some would say that's a good evolution. We needed to get rid of all the superstitious stuff and all the common religious stuff. Well, yeah, I would say there's a lot of folk religious kind of stuff that you could probably say is not, we could do without, but there's also a lot of, I think, truth buried in them. So you got to mine it. You got to go look for the gold. I call it the golden thread. You got to go look for the gold and the gems, and you have to dig them up. So, and you have to be careful not to take any story, literally. So I think you can prepare yourself to make this journey. And there's a lot of great examples out there and guides, I think, who have done it well and that have left us some really great markers. But the truth is, the real path, the real reality is there is no path. You need to make your way into the wilderness. You need to make a little pack. And I mean this, figuratively. You need to make a pack and you need to go into the imaginal world. You need to go into it, have conversations, meet the creatures. Because I'll tell you what, the devil's down there too. The devil's down there. And guess what? He's you. I showed myself that I am the monsters. I am the monster. So, 'cause what to do with all this. Do with it what you will. Dismiss it. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to any of us, and just go about your life. Forget you ever heard any of this, and I doubt there's very many people listening to this. But who knows? Who knows? I don't know anything. Or will. But it's you start to see that things are not as they seem. And sometimes things are exactly as they seem. And I'm talking of ignorance. That's exactly what it appears to be. This is one of my favorite pieces. Chopin's Nocturne in C sharp minor.